So now we have added entities, the corresponding underlying classes have already been added. Now time to create or time to consume them in our project. So in this my table view controller, or this particular controller, for example, once I add the username, this is where I am inserting or maybe editing or deleting the object. So this is the right place to use the what you call CoreData objects. So first point, I need to bring the manage object context object inside this view controller. So let me define that property. Managed object context. Just student, some sort of name, just trying to give. So I just define the property, and I would recommend synthesizing it. Maybe I'm pretty returning old developer, I prefer synthesizing, but it is author synthesized. You really may not be required to do that, but let me find. Okay. So the object synthesize setter getter method added, so that's what our understanding. Okay. So now initialize that object. In fact, that manager object context have been initialized in app delegate. Mean this particular object is residing in app delegate. I need to bring that object to my view controller in this case. So that's pretty easy. In fact, just import the headers of app delegate. App delegate is like a window object. Okay, so equivalent to JavaScript. It's a wrapper of your entire application, a wrapper of entire view controller or SQLite or whatever you create. It just hold everything. So we should be very careful on using app delegate object. It's quite heavyweight as well. I think UI shared. UI application, shared application. Using that, I can get the instance. The UI application, the instance of your application. From there, you identify what is the object defined inside. Nothing but you will end up getting an app delegate object. So app delegate, since you have got it, now time to initialize this particular manage object context, what you define in this particular class or view controller or my table view controller. Managed object context. So from that, get the message or get the object of manager, because app delegate has the managed object context already been defined and initialized. So it would be appropriate from there you get the instance of managed object context. So once you have a managed object context, you're fine, ready to move on. Okay, first thing, let us identify where the insert is happening. I hope it is. This is the iteration block. I hope here. Is that? Getting a callback, like this is the place I'm just going to add edit view controller and bringing the data whatever being typed in the name field and subject field, and this is what I was creating a student's record mutable array. So here let me start the, and one more thing, I need to import my entity descriptions. What is that? Student entity. I would recommend this one because this is already inheriting this one, so we will have all the set get methods. So first thing, student entity this instance can be taken from your managed object context. I mean, that's what we have done because that's the only object has the reference to all your SQLite environment. That can be taken from ns entity description I was searching for the method. Entity description is for inserting. Okay, so I think from the managed object context itself I can get it. Student is there any classes available? So I'm getting it. Let me find the documentation. Because I did the correct one. Yeah, in fact, we are trying to insert only, so it's correct. As entity description, insert new object for entity name. Couple of objects it requires. One is first one, which entity name you are trying to access. Make sure you type it without any typos. Student entity. What happened? I think that. Okay. So I'm just trying to find the entity, student entity, and in managed object context. Of course, we have the manager object context already. Self student managed object context. So the student entity could be built. This is for insert option. In fact, I need to write something for edit also, but this is at least good for insertion. Find the entity description. From that, identify the student entity, and from the managed object context. So it maintains some sort of entity description. I mean, your data model, some description file exists. In that, it is going to find the entity called student entity using the managed object context. Once you find, you have the instance of student entity. Okay. Now set yes name. See, that the setter method added because of the dynamic property we added to that. Set name. What's the name? It is actually coming from add edit view controller name field text. Set subject subject field text. Once I am done with that, I created the student entity, defined the attribute values. Now save it and use the managed object context. Sorry, it is. I recommend a local object or any other object you defined it. I mean, the object defined in this class with the self keyword, student managed object context. Save. The moment you hit this line, this particular value would be inserted. It is expecting error callback. Okay, we don't have error object, so I can define an ns error object. It's not still appropriate. First point, the ns error object is a null value. Nil mean here equivalent is null. Okay, so when your insertion either goes success or failure, two condition possible. Success, the error could be nil, no problem. But when the insertion goes failed, the error object will have some other object. Mean that what is the exact error? Mean this particular thing will have nil pointer, a pointer which is pointing to a null object, and one point if error happens, it may point you to a different pointer. I think it's slightly a pointer concept behind, because this particular point here, the nil or the error object by default pointing to one particular pointer, that pointer will give you a null object. That's one. But one point, if something goes wrong, it has to point to a different object where the error information could be fetched. In such a case, sending pointer to a pointer can be done by prefixing an ampersand symbol. So technically what you try to say, the error will be nil as long as the insertion goes successful. Error will have a different value when the insertion fails. So that's a point here. The ampersand in Objective C, what we really say, sending pointer to the pointer. That's what we say, because this actually pointing to some other address, but I'll have to point it to some other address when the insertion goes fail. So that's a concept. I'm going to do this quite often, in fact. So once I do this particular line of code, execute particular line of code, I will have my student record saved in the CoreData. Mean first I need to build the student entity object that can be fetched, or initialized using entity description and finding entity description. Entity description of your data model. Nothing but this file. Here couple of entities are there. In this one of an entity I would like to find. That entity is student entity. So using manager object context, I am querying specific entity, then I have this particular student entity initialized and defining, because this one is for insert new object for entity. It's not for editing, it is only for insertion. So once I set the values and call this manager object context save, remember, since I define the manager object context here, the manager object context will have the instance of a new object. That object will get saved. If any errors happen, it will call the error. So that's one single line. The job is done. So this is for insertion. In fact, I need to do the same for edit also. But at this point, at least insertion has been done. And how do I verify whether it is inserted or not? We'll do one thing. The stability controller populating the data from a mutable array called person data. So I'm just going to make this person data load everything from the CoreData. So let me see. Code logic I have to change even though, but let me at least query at this point. First point, I need to query all the data, whatever the data is there in CoreData. That is possible using ns fetch request object. First you are going to make a request. Request mean query, and when the query is successfully executed, you will end up getting a result set. So let's create most of the objects will have their fetch request fetch. Okay, NS fetch request has a method called fetch request with entity name. What is the entity name? We have already given student entity. You can also add one more NS predicate object. For example, uh, there are two possibilities. Select star from table name. One. Select star from table name where a condition may appear. That condition part will come in the predicate part. So you have to define NS predicate. Maybe like I'll try to. At this point, I just need to query all the data. I may not require, but I'll just show you. Predicate with the format. You can say yes name equal to it's like what I have done. Select star from student entity where s name equal to us. This is what I am trying to build. So if you define a predicate, it will try to query a specific record based on the condition. So the predicate with the format, it's nothing but a string we are formatting, where the at the rate percentage at the rate comes, it will be replaced by this string. How many at the rate is coming? So and s sub. So you can extend your query and the conditions like this one, but at this point I am not going to need it because I just need all the data which has been saved. So I don't need to define the predicate, this predicate or something. So the person data, so it's a mutable array. From the managed object context, fetch. Okay, I'll first have this one done. Need to find which one the method should be looking like. Execute fetch request. Okay, it's actually giving me a NS array. No problem. Fetch request is request already built. So and the error object. Again, I need an error object. NS error. You can either initialize or leave it because it's anyway it's going to be replaced. From the manage object context, you are going to call execute a query. In this case, fetch request already been made. At this point, select star from student entity. That's what it has been created. When you add a predicate, naturally, that also I'll keep it for your reference. Maybe in future case you may require. You can set the predicate to your request, and dot notation will do. You can set the predicate, the condition if at all required, to the request. So it will build a slightly complex query like select star from student entity where s name equal to this one and something like that. The where condition could be added if you have the predicate added. Otherwise, it will simply build select star from student entity. Maybe for your understanding. This is the query it will build, but this one will build So if you have the further option, you may add it, otherwise leave it. Okay, now fetch request has been made, and that value, it's actually the array. It is giving me an array in fact, but I have a mutable array here. Okay, we can make a, for example, I'll just capture the value. But what I have, person data, what's the name, student data or what? Person data. It's actually a mutable array. So a simple array can be converted to a mutable array by making mutable copy. I mean, a hard-coded array can be converted into a mutable array by having a mutable copy. It means just make a copy and create a mutable array and point it towards. That's what it does. So if you have an NS array, which sometimes need to be modified, I mean, mutable copies mean mutable arrays can be indexed, modified, and it can have its indexing capability, insert, update, whatever thing it can do. But if it is a static array, once you define the values, you don't have any option to change. But unfortunately, this guy is giving me a NS array, but the data, my table view controller is populated using a mutable array. So one point I would need a mutable copy of that NS array. So in that case, I can do it in this way. But I prefer NS array itself more than enough, because every data is going to be saved in the database at this point. I'm not going to locally manipulate the object. But leave it as it is. We'll have a mutable copy. Instead of writing this way, I don't want to consume a lot of lines of the code. In one line is job done. So I have the data now received. Let me iterate it over to identify whether the values are coming or not. Person data, object at index I, okay, I slightly end up in a slightly complicated scenario, because the person data will have a instance of a result set at this point, because person data will be from a manager object context. It will have an object of that particular entity. You'll be end up getting the student entity objects. First thing, I need to build this object, student entity. So once you build this entity, then you can call it yes name. So if everything goes well, I should see this log whether when the data is inserted or not. Okay, so this particular part, first make a fetch request, build your query. If you have a predicate part, add it, otherwise leave it. And Using the managed object context, execute the request and point the error object, and you will end up getting mutable, NS array, make it as a mutable copy in this case, and iterate it over and identify what's the value it is. Couple of things I need to do. First point, this one also I should not insert directly because the insertion should happen from student record. That I'll add this part a little later. I'll come back. The table view also, the way it populating is also wrong. Student object record, it is not NS dictionary anymore. It's going to be a a student entity at this point. So I'll just comment this one. What is students record and something different? Are we missing something? Person data, and we have two mutable arrays. What exactly the person data is being done, and it's not being synthesized. That's the reason self I need to add. Okay, the data is being populated because of the student record. Okay, something we have to update at this point. Okay, student. So from here we are going to iterate it. When student record inserted, this particular line is not at all required at this point because it's based on the dictionary, mutable dictionary. But in this case, we are populating using reload the data. Okay, few changes I need to do. I'll do one thing. I'll create a function. Some errors are there. Let me. Okay. It doesn't require any arguments. So this particular functions where the fetch request has come. This is where we have written. I'm just going to implement that function. So user defined function. I'm just going to move this block whole bunch here so that I can call multiple times. When student record is initialized, here I can table view reload the data. Whenever a new insertion happens, it will call this particular function, query all the data from a CoreData, and update itself or update the table view, but we have to modify the required block. The table view which is getting the data from mutable array, that part I need to modify. First build the student entity object. It is called student record object. Object at index, from the index path row, build the object. If required, you can typecast it. It's not needed. Typecasting will help. From the student record, I am getting the student entity object. Now call the name from the label pointed. So each iteration of your student's record, particular mutable array, will have an instance of student entity object. In that, I am just looking for a student name to be displayed in my table view. Did a lot of change to see everything goes well, otherwise we'll have a difficulty. This is for editing purpose. We have to define that. This is also wrong, but anyway, come back. I'm expecting a big crash one point of time. Once I insert, it did work. Okay, just inserted the value. If I close the application and reopen it again, if I still see the value, mean my CoreData is saving the value. So that's the only way I can verify. And call it in reload. Okay, let me close the application, call it one more time. Whatever. Okay, let me run one more time. I still see the value, so it's been persisted now. The value is being inserted permanently. The edit won't work because I haven't added the edit part of the code, but at least the value is being inserted. If you see that the log is printing, it means it is calling this loop and printing the logs. So it means everything is being saved. So now the value is being saved. Now I can, what is that command, shift H, home. I can anytime open the application, I'll have my values permanently saved. Even if you close your application, see, just I terminated. Once I terminate, it will shut down, and run it one more time. You have the values permanently saved. So the CoreData saving all the values. So what we have really done here is we created an entity in the CoreData model, I mean a table, and we define attributes for that particular entity. In this case I have two strings, attributes mean fields. Once I define, I create the corresponding classes by right clicking and telling which entity you would like to do. For example, I'll show it again, a new file, and make sure you select the core data and clicking the NS managed object context. If you see that it is not highlighting now because it is already existing, that's the reason. But very first time when you create, you will have to highlight it. Once you create, you will end up seeing these utility classes. So this class having a setter getter information added. After that you can start consuming it. Make sure you first initialize the manager object context from app delegate. App delegate instance can be taken from UI application, shared application instance. From there, get the instance of your manager object context. Once you get it, and you can make a fetch request to get all the data with predicate if required, or you can also create an entity description to insert the value. So at this point, I've just made the insertion and fetching the data. Of course, I need to add edit and delete option. So maybe edit slightly complicated because not to do with the core data, but the design perspective I need to slightly modify, because at this point it is breaking because I haven't added the code for that. That part I need to fix. And delete we have already added particular interface, but this one is also force closing, so something wrong. So these particular two functions we need to fix. So that part would slightly need time. Maybe I'll take that afternoon session. But once we add delete and edit option, we are perfectly fine with the core data. But I would recommend you to create more entity objects and play around with that, because the procedure is simple. You have to make sure there should be at least one data model exist. Once the data model existing, once you find it, make sure you initialize or create a new entity. Once your entity is created, create attributes for that entity. Once you are done with that, create the associated classes. After that, all you need to do, make a fetch request to query all the data or conditional data, or make an entity description, search through the entity description, get the insert instance. Once you get that, I mean student entity, then you can add a new values to that. So this particular example is having insert and query, I mean select star or select star from where, whatever. So these two functionality I have added to this example. Afternoon, I'll extend this one with the edit and delete option. That would slightly, it's not going to take much time, but why I am stopping at this point mean I need to do a slight changes in the segue, the way the segue is being handled. Sorry, this one. So I have to do some sort of design level changes. Then again, coming back to core data. Core data deleting is pretty simple. It's not so difficult. Deleting or updating, it's entirely just piece of cake. You can easily do it. But only thing I have to do some sort of design level changes. I'll take maybe in half an hour or 45 minutes in the afternoon session. That I'll complete. Once I'm done with that, make sure you complete it as a one single project. If you have already done partially, whatever it is, fine, but create a new project, make it from the scratch and add the core data feature and see and test it. So that's the task you have for the entire day, which you have to do. Maybe tomorrow morning session or maybe 1 hour I'll give you the time. Later I'll take the further extension I need to do. At this point the username password is a hard coded one. Is there any other way I can save the username password instead of core data? So that part I'm going to do. Maybe exact similar thing what we saw in the local storage in JavaScript. Here also we have a temporary preferential level storages. That part I'm going to add. So once I'm done with that, we know the view controller mechanism and how segue works, and forward segue and unwinding the segue, and we also know the core data, and we know the auto layouting bit, and of course we also know about preferential amount of data, how to handle them. So this kind of a way, once we complete one round of Objective-C part gets completed. The next part we'll have to play around with the images. So far we have nothing, and how to handle the external content, images or video files, how to handle that into our project and create some sort of, like, so far we haven't done the modification of left and right button. We have just been using a lot of default buttons. Sometime I may need to change, for example, I don't want this login. Instead, I want to see some other button name. So overriding the existing feature. Those kind of area we are going to work on, and more controls, of course, like toggle buttons and various control UI elements, which we are going to see going further. So if you are stick to the concept, pay attention to that. Learning iOS is pretty simple. It's like just a piece of cake. All you need a practice. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. So afternoon, I'll take some half an hour, 45 minutes to half an hour. I'll take it. Then I'll complete it. Those who wants to go for the preparation can still do it, but still give a room for your Objective-C and iOS. Finish that. I do understand there is some sort of complication, but please, your exit part should be cleared first.